What's something you found out about your significant other years into the relationship that made you reevaluate the whole relationship? Story 1. 1 year into my relationship, I discovered something that made me reevaluate everything. My partner revealed that he was about to gain full custody of his son, a child I had no idea existed until that moment. This unexpected news caught me off guard and forced me to reconsider the foundations of our relationship. The revelation of this hidden aspect of my partner's life made me question how well I truly knew them and whether we were truly compatible for the long term. It was a jarring experience that required a lot of honest communication and self-reflection to navigate. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. Years into our relationship, I learned that my partner had been diagnosed with Asperger's in grade school. At first, I didn't take it too seriously, knowing many people who casually claimed to be autistic, but one day as I watched them meticulously organize their collection of 50 pocket watches and then pack a new axe into their backpack full of supplies, it suddenly clicked. This wasn't just an offhand comment. My partner was truly on the autism spectrum. Looking back, I could see how their unique brain wiring had caused friction at times. Actions that frustrated me were not born of manipulation, but simply a different way of processing the world. To my relief, my partner was very upfront about their condition from the start and was always willing to meet me halfway, even if they didn't fully understand my perspective. Embracing my partner's autism has only made me love them more. They are the quirkiest, most endearing person I've ever known. Reevaluating our relationship in this new light has brought us closer together. Story 3. My wife and I both love musicals. Whenever we're in New York City, we try to catch a show on Broadway, and if a good musical comes through our town, we'll go see that too. One day I was telling her a story about when I performed in The Wizard of Oz back in high school, and her eyes went wide. "You performed in musicals?" she asked, surprised. Yeah," I replied. She was quiet for about 20 minutes, then said, "Okay, that's fine. I just never knew I was dating a guy who was in musicals." I never quite understood why that detail threw her so much, but it didn't seem to bother her again after that initial reaction. It was just one of those unexpected things you learn about your partner years into a relationship. That makes you see them a little differently, even if it doesn't change how you feel about them. Story 4. I had been with my husband for several years when I made a shocking discovery. I learned that he had been planning to start dangerous fires and even harm law enforcement officers. His twisted scheme was to frame me for these crimes so that his girlfriend could move in and take my place while I served time in prison for his actions. It was a horrifying realization that completely shattered my trust and forced me to reevaluate our entire relationship. I had never imagined he could be capable of such calculated malice and deceit. It was an earth-shattering betrayal that left me questioning everything about the man I thought I knew. That kind of revelation changes a person, and it certainly changed how I saw my husband from that point on. Story 5. I was completely blindsided when I discovered that my partner had been unfaithful to me for years. Turns out she had been secretly meeting up with her exes and cheating on me the entire time. Over 8 years of deceit. I only found out because I ended up contracting a transmittable illness from her. Thankfully, it was curable, but the emotional toll was devastating. I was so relieved that we didn't have any children together. I knew I had to get out of that relationship immediately, so I divorced her and moved away. The heartbreak led me down a dark path of drinking too much, but in time, I was able to heal. Eventually, I met the most incredible person who has shown me what a healthy, loving relationship can be. We got married and started a family together. Looking back, I'm grateful that I had the courage to leave that toxic situation, because now I know the true joy of a fulfilling partnership. Story 6. I've been with my partner since we were 11 years old. We've gone through so much together over the years. But recently, I discovered something that really made me question our entire relationship. Shortly after we moved in together, my partner had a breakdown and confessed that they were hearing voices. They were really struggling with this, saying the voices were making them feel incredibly stressed. I encouraged them to see a doctor, who just brushed it off as stress. But the issues only got worse from there. My partner started becoming terrified of mirrors, convinced that the people on the inside were going to take them away. We kept going back to the doctors, but they refused to give a proper diagnosis, saying they didn't want to label my partner with something bad. It was so hard for me to see my partner going through this internal pain, especially since they had always been the one supporting my own mental health struggles in the past. I realized I had been so selfish, and it was time for me to step up and be there for them. Our relationship definitely became unbalanced as I tried to pick up the slack, but ironically, I feel like we're now in an even stronger, healthier place. We're still trying to get my partner the specialized care they need, but I'm committed to being by their side every step of the way. Story 7. I had been with my partner for years, and we had built a strong, trusting relationship, or so I thought. Over time, I began to notice that she would sometimes lie about small, insignificant things. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was no big deal. But as these little lies continued to accumulate, I started to question my own perception of the truth and my instincts. One day, I caught her in a blatant lie, and when I confronted her with the evidence, she stubbornly denied it. This wasn't a huge betrayal, but it was enough to open my eyes to the possibility that there might be a deeper issue in our relationship. A close friend even suggested that I might have been the victim of gaslighting, where someone systematically manipulates your sense of reality. This revelation made me reevaluate the entire foundation of our relationship. If I couldn't trust her to be honest about the small things, how could I trust her with the bigger, more important aspects of our life together? It was a sobering and unsettling realization that left me questioning everything. Story 8. One evening, my partner and I had gone out to dinner separately. As we were driving home, they suddenly merged into my lane without signaling. At first, I was irritated by this reckless behavior, but when I realized it was actually my partner's car, it gave me an unsettling feeling. I couldn't shake the strange sensation that washed over me in that moment. It made me question aspects of our relationship that I had never thought to doubt before. That small incident left me reevaluating everything about us and how well I truly knew my significant other, even after all this time together. Story 9. I never would have guessed the shocking truth about my ex-partner's past. Years into our relationship, I learned that he had been using methamphetamine up until right after the birth of our first child. This earth-shattering revelation only came to light after we had already gone through a divorce. Looking back, so many things started to make sense. The mood swings, the financial troubles, the mysterious absences. If only I had known sooner, it might have changed the entire trajectory of our relationship and family. That discovery really made me reevaluate everything we had been through together. Story 10. I never realized how much my partner craved drama and conflict. For example, we recently had a 3-day silent treatment over a simple good night text I sent before bed. They were convinced it was meant for another woman, even though we live together, work together, and share a car. How could I possibly have a secret girlfriend when we're together 24/7? But my partner is always looking for fights, always convinced I'm up to something. I had no idea this was their default mode until years into our relationship. It's really made me rethink everything and wonder if we're truly compatible. Story 11. Years into our relationship, I learned something about my partner that made me reevaluate the whole thing. One day, during a heated argument, my girlfriend casually mentioned that every time we fight, she fantasizes about stabbing me. I was taken aback. The casual way she said it, as if it were a normal feeling, made me deeply uncomfortable. I had to step back and seriously reconsider whether this relationship was healthy and safe for me. It shook me to the core, and I knew I needed to have an in-depth discussion with her about her thoughts and feelings, and whether we could work through this in a constructive way. This was definitely a turning point that made me question everything about our partnership. Story 12. I've been married to my wife for 9 years now. We met when we were just 15 and have grown up together, graduating, traveling, and knowing each other inside and out. Or so I thought. One day, as I was feeding our kids lunch, I walked into the bathroom and witnessed something that took me by surprise. My wife, whom I've been with for 13 years, was shaving the barely visible peach fuzz on her upper lip. She looked at me with an embarrassed expression, and I couldn't help but wonder, what else has she been hiding from me all this time? We've always had an open relationship, with little to no boundaries. We would often continue conversations even while one of us was using the bathroom. But there were times when my wife would lock the door, and I never really understood why. Now it all makes sense. This discovery has made me reevaluate our entire relationship. I can't help but question what else she might be hiding from me, despite our seemingly transparent bond. It's a strange feeling, realizing that there may be more to my wife than I ever knew. Story 13. I was about a year into a relationship when I made a shocking discovery. It turned out my partner's ex-girlfriend was actually still his girlfriend the entire time we had been together. When my partner's other girlfriend and I realized what was going on, we decided to confront him together. In the end, we both broke things off with him. But you know what? That experience actually brought the two of us closer together, and we ended up becoming great friends despite the messy situation. Story 14. I never would have guessed that the stories my partner told about their childhood and education were all fabricated. Years into our relationship, I stumbled upon old transcripts that revealed they had attended a university completely different from the one they claimed. Not only that, it was in another country altogether. Looking back, there were probably other signs that things weren't adding up, but I had brushed them aside. Finding out the truth really made me question the entire foundation of our relationship and wonder what else they might have been dishonest about. It was a shocking realization that left me reevaluating everything. Story 15. Years into my relationship, I discovered that my partner had been unfaithful the entire time. Not only that, but they had also lied about being psychologically abused by their father, something I had believed and tried to be understanding about. This revelation made me seriously question the foundation of our entire relationship. I felt betrayed and wondered how much else they may have hidden from me. It was a devastating realization that made me reevaluate everything we had built together and whether it was even worth continuing. Story 16. One day, several years into our relationship, I witnessed a troubling incident that really made me reconsider everything. My partner became irrationally angry over a minor homework assignment they were struggling with. They ended up lashing out, punching a wall, and loudly blaming me, even though I was just sitting on the couch quietly. Once the outburst had passed, my partner then turned around and expected me to comfort them, as if I was somehow responsible for their outburst. It was a pathetic display, and in that moment, I realized this wasn't the healthy, supportive partnership I thought I had. I'm grateful I was eventually able to move past accepting that kind of toxic behavior. Story 17. I had been with my partner for several years, thinking we were building a life together. But one day, I discovered that she had been lying to me about her financial situation the entire time. Not only was she deeply in debt, but she had also been secretly plotting to get rid of me altogether. It was a horrifying revelation that completely shattered my trust and made me question everything about our relationship. I had to reevaluate whether I could ever feel safe or secure with this person again. It was a devastating realization that left me questioning the very foundation of our partnership. Story 18. I'd been with my partner for a while, and we had our little quirks and preferences. One day, we were sharing a batch of brownies, and I noticed something interesting. They both gravitated towards different parts of the treat. I liked the crisp, caramelized edges, while they went for the soft, fudgy middles. It was a small moment, but it felt so significant to me. In that instant, I realized that we complemented each other perfectly. Where I craved the bold, intense flavors, they sought the rich, decadent center. It was as if the brownies had been made just for us, two halves of a whole. That realization filled me with a sense of completeness, like all the pieces had fallen into place. It wasn't just about the brownies, it was about how we balanced each other out, how we brought out the best in one another. From that day on, I knew that we were meant to be, that our differences were what made us work so well together. Story 19. What's something you found out about your SO years into the relationship that made you reevaluate the whole relationship? I had been married to my wife for 7 years when I made a shocking discovery. We had always known that my wife had Asperger's, but I never realized how deeply it affected our relationship until one casual conversation. It started with an innocent remark about our first kiss. To me, that moment had been electric, a genuine spark of chemistry that left my lips tingling. But when I brought it up, my wife revealed something startling. She had never actually felt anything when we kissed. She had simply gone along with it because she knew it was an important romantic gesture, even though she couldn't process it the same way I did. I was completely flabbergasted. Suddenly, every single kiss we had shared felt like a lie. I started questioning whether my wife truly loved me or if she was just going through the motions. It was a devastating realization that rocked the foundation of our marriage. It took months of therapy and constant reassurance from my wife before I could come to terms with this new information. She explained that while she didn't experience our kisses the same way I did, she did genuinely love me. It was just her Asperger's that made her process those intimate moments differently. 4 years later, we're still together, and I've learned to accept that our relationship will never be typical. But the love is real, even if it manifests in ways I don't always understand. It was a difficult adjustment, but one that ultimately strengthened our bond. Story 20. What's something you found out about your SO years into the relationship that made you reevaluate the whole relationship? My wife and I got married quickly without really getting to know each other first. We were both raised in a conservative religious tradition, and our marriage was shaped by those beliefs, with me as the provider and her as the nurturer. But about 6 years ago, I left that faith behind. My wife followed a few years later. As we navigated this major change, we started opening up to each other in a way we never had before. I was amazed to discover just how intelligent and dynamic my wife truly was. I had always cared for her deeply, but the rigid gender roles of our upbringing had prevented me from fully recognizing her incredible capabilities. Now, freed from the constraints of our former beliefs, I rely on my wife's wisdom and insights constantly. I'm awed by how much I was missing out on, simply because I had been taught to defer to male religious authorities rather than my own partner. Leaving our faith has allowed us to shed the baggage of our sexist upbringings and build a profoundly meaningful, equitable relationship. I feel so fortunate to have this incredible lifelong companion by my side. Story 22. After a year of marriage, my partner suddenly announced they wanted to join the Marine Corps. They also expected me to drop out of law school, have children, care for their mother, and manage the household alone while they were deployed. It was a massive shift in our plans and responsibilities that I simply couldn't take on. I had to respectfully decline. That lifestyle just didn't align with my own goals and values anymore. It made me seriously reevaluate our entire relationship and whether we were still on the same page. Story 23. I'll never forget the day I found out how deeply my partner's beliefs about parenting differed from my own. When we had our first child, I thought we were on the same page. This was a planned pregnancy, and we had discussed everything. But as soon as the baby arrived, I realized I was in for a rude awakening. My partner became overbearing during the pregnancy, insisting on things like breastfeeding without even consulting me. I tried to brush it off as new parent jitters, figuring they'd get used to it. But that was just the beginning. As it turns out, my partner believed that childcare was solely the mother's responsibility. They refused to change diapers, soothe the baby when they cried, or even get up in the night to help. I was expected to handle all of that, on top of working a full-time job. I'll admit, I was confused and, honestly, a bit appalled at first. But I told myself that with time they'd come around and pitch in more. That illusion was shattered when our baby got seriously ill while my partner was away on a fishing trip. The doctors thought it might be meningitis, a life-threatening situation. I begged my partner to come home, but they refused, saying they didn't want to lose the money they'd paid for the rest of the trip. That's when I realized just how deeply our values differed, and I had to reevaluate the entire relationship. Story 24. I was totally in love with my partner, and we had a future all planned out. But about a year into our relationship, I discovered that they had a strong family history of cancer. Their grandfather and father both had head and neck cancers, and several other close relatives were cancer survivors as well. As someone who wanted kids someday, this news really gave me pause. I worried that our future children might inherit this genetic predisposition. Despite my fears, my partner meant more to me than anything. I decided to move forward with the relationship because our connection was so deep. Tragically, just a few years later, my partner was also diagnosed with head and neck cancer, just like their family members. We fought hard, but ultimately, they passed away about a year ago. It was an unimaginably difficult loss. Even with all the pain, I have no regrets. I'm so grateful for the time we had together, and I'll always cherish my partner. The cancer may have taken them from me, but it could never erase the love we shared. Story 25. I had been with my partner for years, and I thought we had a strong, trusting relationship. But over time, I started to notice some concerning behaviors. First, he was struggling with a Xanax addiction, and he had hidden those struggles from me. I forgave him, thinking we could work through it together. Then I discovered he had secretly taken $4,000 from our joint savings account, not an account that I had been the sole contributor to. I forgave him again, hoping he would change. But the real turning point came when I found out he had been sexting with random people and trying to arrange secret meetups. That was the moment I realized I needed to reevaluate everything. The final straw, though, was when I realized he didn't actually want an equal partnership. He expected me to do all the shopping, cooking, and cleaning, while he just sat back and let me handle it all. He had been pretending for years to want the same things I did, but it was all just an act. I deserve a relationship built on mutual respect and responsibility. Ultimately, getting a divorce was one of the best decisions I ever made. Story 26. After being together for 7 long years, I made a startling discovery about my partner's educational background. To my surprise, I learned that they were actually a high school dropout, without even a GED to their name. Initially, they had told me they were studying game design in college and had even turned down a job opportunity, or maybe an internship, with a major gaming company like EA Toronto, just so they could stay with me. At the time, I had encouraged them to go, saying we could figure out the rest later, as this was a chance they couldn't pass up. Looking back, that should have been a red flag, a sign that something wasn't quite right. Love can truly blind you, but only for so long. Story 27. I never expected to discover the truth about my partner's past relationships. For years, they had painted a bleak picture of their ex-partners, describing them as unfaithful, dishonest, and even unstable. I believed every word, sympathizing with my partner and feeling grateful that I was different. However, over time, I started to notice inconsistencies in their stories. Little by little, I uncovered the real truth. It was actually my partner who had embodied those negative qualities all along. The ex-partners they had vilified were nothing like how they had portrayed them. This revelation completely shattered my perception of our relationship. I realized that my partner had been lying to me and likely had been dishonest in our own relationship as well. We broke up and got back together multiple times over the course of our 6-year relationship, but this past weekend, I knew it had to end for good. I couldn't continue trusting someone who had so thoroughly deceived me about their past. Story 28. After 7 years of marriage, my husband finally opened up to me about a deeply traumatic experience from his past. He revealed that he had been sexually abused by his older brother for 6 years when he was a child. This revelation shed new light on the struggles we had faced in our intimate life together. Determined to support my husband through this, I did extensive research to learn how I could best support a survivor of sexual abuse. I made it a priority to reassure him that he was safe with me and that sex was an act of love, not something to be feared. We established a safe word that he could use if he ever felt overwhelmed. Over time, I've seen my husband grow and heal. He's starting to understand that I truly want him and that he can feel safe being a little more in control during our intimate moments. It's been a difficult journey, but I'm incredibly grateful to have such a strong, resilient partner. Our relationship has only grown deeper through this challenge. Story 29. When we first met, my partner told me they struggled with depression. At the time, I didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation, having never dealt with it before. But over the 5.5 years we've been together, I've gained a deep understanding of just how serious depression can be. There have been times when my partner has called me, distraught and talking about ending it all. I've rushed to be by their side, not knowing what to do but needing to be there. I've witnessed the endless cycles of crying, the countless visits to the doctor, the ups and downs of medication. It's been challenging, to say the least, navigating these uncharted waters. But through it all, I've come to realize that this is simply a part of my partner's life, and, by extension, a part of our life together. I don't mind it anymore. In fact, my partner has told me that I'm the one who keeps them going. They are still an independent person, but I'm there when they need me. This experience has taught me the true meaning of commitment and unconditional love. Depression is a formidable foe, but we're facing it together, one day at a time. It's not easy, but it's worth it. I'm fully aware of the seriousness of this battle, but I'm in it for the long haul. Story 30. I had been with my partner for 5 years, and we had even gotten married and started planning out our future together. But then I discovered that the whole time they had been unfaithful and racking up a mountain of debt behind my back. All those plans we made, they knew they would never come to fruition because of the secret life they were living. Yet they still let me commit to marrying them, trapping me in a life I never wanted and could never have. I would have been the one left to deal with the fallout from their actions. It was a devastating betrayal of trust, and I knew then that I had to walk away from the relationship for good. Sometimes you think you know someone, only to find out years later that they've been hiding their true self all along. Story 31. Years into my marriage, my ex-husband confessed a terrible secret to me. He admitted that when he was a young child, under the age of 10, he had sexually abused his younger brothers. At the time, he didn't fully understand what he was doing, and it's possible he was a victim of abuse himself, though he couldn't recall the details or didn't want to share them. This revelation gave me a very different perspective on my ex-husband's personality and behaviors over the course of our relationship. We ultimately divorced for unrelated reasons, but learning this deeply troubling information about his past made me reevaluate everything. It was an incredibly difficult thing to grapple with, knowing the person I'd been with had committed such serious acts, even as a child themselves. This discovery shook the foundation of our marriage in a way I never could have anticipated. Story 32. I was just out of high school and was dating a serious girlfriend. One day we went to get lunch at a Subway sandwich shop. I was shocked when my partner was incredibly rude to the young worker behind the counter, criticizing how they made the sandwich. After we left, my partner continued to insult the employee, calling them stupid and incompetent. This was the first time I'd really seen this side of my partner. They were consistently disrespectful and dismissive towards service and retail workers. It made me see my partner in a very different light, and I started to seriously question our relationship. We didn't stay together much longer after that incident. Story 33. I was with my partner for over a decade and a half when I made a startling discovery about them. They had always been a bit secretive and paranoid, which raised some flags for me over the years. But one day I learned that the birthday they had been celebrating all this time wasn't even their real one. Apparently, when they moved to the US from England in the 1970s, their passport had the wrong birth date recorded May instead of November, and they just never bothered to fix it. I'm not sure why they felt the need to keep up this facade for so long, but it really made me question how well I actually knew this person I had committed so much of my life to. It was a huge breach of trust that left me reevaluating everything about our relationship. Story 34. As I got to know my partner better over the years, I realized that their outlook on life was quite different from my own. While I tend to be a more positive and optimistic person, trying to focus on the bright side, my partner has a more cynical, realistic view. They can be rather pessimistic at times, seeing the potential pitfalls and negatives in any situation. At first, I thought our contrasting perspectives might balance each other out, with my sunny disposition offsetting their gloomier tendencies. But over time, I found that our differing worldviews were starting to cause tension and distance in our relationship. I had to reevaluate whether we were truly compatible in the long run, given how fundamentally we seemed to differ in our approaches to life. Story 35. After being together for some time, I learned that my partner had been recently diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Looking back, I could see how many of their actions and outbursts were connected to this condition. They had just started taking mood-stabilizing medication and begun working with a great therapist to manage everything. I realized that if they hadn't taken these important steps to actively address the bipolar disorder, it likely would have been a deal-breaker for me. The diagnosis helped explain a lot, but their willingness to confront it head-on and get the support they needed ultimately strengthened our relationship. Story 36. When I first started dating my partner, they seemed a bit reserved and cautious with their emotions. I fell for them quickly, but they always kept me at arm's length, never fully opening up. I worried that I cared more than they did. However, as our relationship progressed, I started to see a completely different side to them. A few years into our marriage, I discovered that they have the heart of a true romantic. They are incredibly affectionate, sappy, and demonstrative in expressing their love for me. Hearing their heartfelt declarations about how beautiful and special I am always catches me by surprise and leaves me in awe. I never would have guessed that this passionate, poetic person was hiding beneath the surface. Seeing them blossom and share this deeply caring side of themselves has only strengthened my conviction that I am the luckiest person to have them in my life. Their transformation has not made me question our relationship, but has instead cemented my belief that we are truly meant for each other. Story 37. I had been with my partner for several years when I learned something unexpected about their past. One day, they opened up to me and shared that they had previously identified as the opposite gender. This revelation caught me off guard, as I had always wondered about some of the physical differences in our intimate moments. Suddenly, things started to make more sense, though I still felt a sense of surprise and uncertainty. This discovery caused me to re-examine our entire relationship, as I grappled with my own preconceptions and tried to understand this new information. It was a complex and thought-provoking experience that ultimately made me reflect deeply on the nature of love, identity, and the importance of open communication in a healthy partnership. Story 38. I'll never forget the day I learned something about my partner that really made me question our whole relationship. We'd been together for years, and I thought I knew them inside and out. But one day, a casual comment they made revealed that I like my partners the same way I like my coffee, without any unwanted extras. The implication was clear, and it completely blindsided me. I had to take a step back and really reevaluate everything about our relationship and whether it was something I could continue to be a part of. It was a huge shock, and it took me a long time to process. Ultimately, it was a deal breaker for me, and I had to make the difficult decision to end things. But I'm grateful I found out sooner rather than later. Story 39. I was in a 13-month relationship, and I had always wondered how my partner knew the passwords to my social media accounts. They would frequently check when I was online, but I didn't mind since I had nothing to hide. One day, they brought up that they had caught me in some lies, though I wasn't sure what they were referring to. When I asked if they had ever lied to me, they said no, but when I asked if they had accessed my personal accounts without permission, they admitted they knew my phone password, even though they had previously denied it. This made me seriously question what else they might have been dishonest about. As the relationship continued for a few more months, the lies just kept piling up. I documented all of them in a notebook and confronted my partner. The biggest lie was when their father found out we were sexually active, and they had me lie and say I had sexually assaulted them in order to avoid getting in trouble. I refused to go along with that as I wasn't going to risk jail time for something that never happened. Eventually, we broke up and I shared the evidence of their lies with their father. It was a messy and unpleasant end to the relationship, and I realized that the foundation of trust had been severely compromised. Story 40. After being together for some time, I made a shocking discovery about my significant other. One day, after being intimate, they casually asked me, "Darling, how much money will we inherit when your parents pass away?" This unexpected comment caused me to reevaluate the entire relationship, as it suggested their motivations may have been more financial than emotional. It was a jarring revelation that left me questioning the true nature of our bond and made me wonder about their long-term intentions. This experience served as a wake-up call, prompting me to take a deeper look at the dynamics and foundation of our partnership. Story 41. I was with my ex-wife for a long time, but eventually I had to reevaluate our whole relationship when I realized she had been hiding a serious addiction from me. It turned out that for 3 whole years, I had no idea she was doing heroin every single day behind my back. The realization that my partner had been struggling with such a severe substance abuse problem for years without me knowing was truly devastating. It made me question everything about our relationship and wonder what else she might have been hiding from me. Discovering that level of deception was a huge betrayal of trust that ultimately led to the end of our marriage. Story 42. I had been with my husband for a long time, and I thought I knew everything about him. We'd worked hard to overcome his past struggles with addiction, and he'd been sober for years, or so I thought. One day I discovered that he had actually been using cocaine monthly for the past 15 years. Just enough to maintain his habit, he said. I was completely blindsided. All those years of sobriety, the progress we'd made, it felt like a lie. I was devastated and heartbroken, and I almost walked away from the relationship right then and there. But we decided to work through it. It wasn't easy, but with a lot of honesty, communication, and hard work, we were able to rebuild the trust and get our relationship back on track. It made me reevaluate everything, but in the end, I'm glad we were able to work it out. Story 43. One day, I discovered that my long-term partner was a fan of a certain animated series featuring colorful equine characters. At first, I was taken aback and needed some time to process this newfound information. I found myself needing to step away and collect my thoughts, staring out the window for a few days before I felt ready to continue our relationship. It was certainly an unexpected revelation that made me reevaluate our dynamic, but in the end, I had to decide whether this was something I could accept or not. Story 44. I'll never forget the day I opened up to my partner about my troubled childhood. When I shared the painful details of the abuse I experienced, her reaction surprised me. Instead of empathy or understanding, she became filled with anger. Not towards me, but towards my family. She has an intense dislike for my father, who is much larger than her, and she's always ready to confront him over his wrongdoings. Despite this revelation, I decided to marry her, but I can't help but wonder how this newfound information might impact our relationship in the long run. Story 45. I had no idea what I was getting into when I first started dating my ex. Looking back, the signs were all there, but I was blinded by love. Years into our relationship, I discovered that she was a narcissist and a sex addict. She had been with countless people, and I would often run into people who knew her, but she would never explain how. At first, we had a great sex life, and she would send me intimate photos all the time, even with 3 kids in the picture. But eventually, the photos stopped coming, and I found out she had been sending them to others as well. That was just the tip of the iceberg. She started having an affair with a coworker who had a newborn, and when I confronted her, she tried to make it seem like it was my fault for not doing enough around the house, even though I worked more and was actively involved with the kids. She made it clear that she had no intention of stopping her infidelity, and when I said I was done, she got furious and refused to go to couples therapy. In a moment of weakness, we slept together one last time before I moved out, and then she had the audacity to tell me that none of this was her fault because she had been raped years ago. I'm just so relieved that the divorce is finally over. It was a wild ride, to say the least. Story 46. I discovered my partner's secret folder on their phone. It contained private photos of various women, some of whom had been coerced or tricked into sending those images. They had also been impersonating someone else to sext with their own sibling without the sibling's knowledge. Whenever I tried to confront them about this, they made me feel like I was overreacting or going crazy. It dawned on me that their past comments, calling me a manic pixie dream girl, were more than just a careless turn of phrase. The whole relationship felt tainted, and I had to reevaluate everything. Story 47. When my partner said they wanted to get married, I assumed they meant they wanted to marry me. But years into our relationship, I realized that wasn't the case at all. Turns out, my partner just wanted to be married. Period. The idea of committing to me specifically wasn't really on their mind. It was more that their friends were getting married, and their mother was pressuring them, so they felt the need to tie the knot with whoever they happened to be dating at the time. Learning that our motivations for marriage were so fundamentally different really made me question the whole foundation of our relationship. I had to do a lot of soul-searching to decide if we were still on the same page. Story 48. Years into my relationship, I made a discovery that made me reevaluate everything. I had been with my partner for nearly a decade, and we were about to celebrate our 10th anniversary. But one day, I stumbled upon something I wasn't meant to see: a secret burner phone hidden away. The revelation shook me to the core as I grappled with the implications of this hidden device. Had my partner been keeping something from me all this time? The trust I had built over the years suddenly felt fragile, and I found myself questioning the foundations of our relationship. It was a jarring moment, one that left me uncertain about the future and forced me to take a hard look at the life we had built together. Story 49. I never realized how short-tempered my partner could be with the kids until one day I witnessed them completely lose their cool. They were cursing and yelling at the children over something trivial, way beyond what I considered a normal reaction. When I brought it up later, they got defensive, arguing that everyone else gets to express themselves when upset, so why can't they? We ended up having a long, drawn-out conversation to get to the bottom of this issue. It really made me reevaluate our whole relationship and whether this was something I could accept long-term. Parenting styles can be a major compatibility factor, and this was a real eye-opener for me. Story 50. I had been dating my partner for a while when I discovered something troubling. They had been hiding a health condition from me the entire time. It turned out they had herpes, but lied about it because they were worried I wouldn't want to be with them if I knew. Well, now I have the condition too, and I can't help but feel betrayed. They should have been upfront from the start instead of putting my health at risk. I would have understood and still chosen to be with them, but by hiding it, they robbed me of that choice. It's really made me question the foundation of our whole relationship. Open and honest communication is so important, you know? I just wish they had trusted me enough to be truthful. Story 51. For the past 22 years, I've been married to my husband, but just this past weekend, I made a startling discovery about his plans for the future. It seems he's reached the pinnacle of his life. We have a nice home, good jobs, and paid-off cars. Now, all he wants to do is stay home, play golf, or video games like Fortnite, and essentially become a hermit. This isn't at all what I want. I'm someone who loves to travel, experience new things, and make wonderful memories. But my husband has essentially decided to just coast through the rest of his life, content to never leave our home again. And he's only 47 years old. It's like he's given up on life. This was a huge shock to me. I always thought we were on the same page about wanting to be adventurous and make the most of our lives together. But it turns out we have very different ideas of what constitutes success and happiness. For him, it's all about the material things, the house, the cars, etc. For me, it's about the experiences and connections we make. I've spoken to him more about this, and it seems his withdrawal may be rooted in some depression. We've both suffered tragic losses in the past couple of years, and he's using video games and online friendships as a way to avoid real human interaction and the potential for more heartbreak. I still love my husband dearly, and I'm not giving up on him. I'm going to ask him to compromise, to spend just a couple days a month doing something new and exciting with me. I know it will take time to break down the walls he's built around his heart, but I'm committed to finding a way for us to reconnect and rediscover the joy in our relationship. This is a setback, but not the end of our story. Story 52. 2 years into our marriage, I made a startling discovery about my husband's past. It turned out he had lied to me about sleeping with other women, including his ex, when we first started dating. At the time, I had no expectations of a serious relationship, but I had explicitly asked him to be honest about any other sexual partners. Somehow, he didn't believe that I genuinely wanted that honesty, so he never said a word. On top of that, I later realized he had also been drinking excessively. I didn't see him often enough in those early days to fully grasp the extent of his alcohol use, but the evidence was there in how much he was spending on going out and how I was having to cover the cost of keeping his cell phone active so we could communicate long distance. All of this betrayal and deception came as a huge shock. I had already committed myself to this man, and now I was faced with learning all these painful truths long after the fact. It really made me question the entire foundation of our relationship. I didn't want to just walk away, though. We ended up going to counseling in an effort to work through this breach of trust. It was a difficult process, but I felt I owed it to our marriage to at least try to salvage things. The road to recovery has been long, but I've worked hard to rebuild that trust, even years later. Story 53. I dated this guy for a few years, and over time I realized he had some deeply troubling views about women. He made it clear he saw them as beneath him. He would constantly tell me stories about how he was the victim in his past relationships, but I later found out he was actually the one being emotionally abusive and trying to manipulate the women in his life. He wanted a partner who looked like a supermodel and had a great career, but he would always try to undermine their accomplishments because he thought, as a man, he was smarter. That kind of toxic attitude was a major deal breaker for me. After we broke up, I started hearing stories from his ex-girlfriends about the trail of destruction he'd left behind. It was clear this wasn't just an isolated incident. He had a pattern of being manipulative and abusive towards the women he dated. That revelation really made me reevaluate the entire relationship and question what else I might have missed or overlooked. Needless to say, I'm glad I got out of that situation when I did. Story 54. I dated this woman for a few years, and things were going pretty well for a while. But one day, I was a little late in responding to her text message because I had briefly checked my social media first. When I finally did get back to her, she exploded on the she. She actually threatened to physically assault me over the phone, just because I had delayed my response. I was shocked and horrified that she would react that way. It made me start to question everything about our relationship and whether she had a violent temper that I had never seen before. I realized then that I didn't truly know this person as well as I thought, and it made me reevaluate the entire foundation of our relationship. It was a major wake-up call that there were some very concerning issues under the surface that I had never noticed before. Story 55. I've been married to my husband for nearly a year now, but we've actually been together for almost 6 years. The other day, I made a shocking discovery that completely changed how I view our relationship. I just found out that when my husband was born, he had a very low chance of survival. The doctors didn't expect him to live, but somehow, against all odds, he pulled through and is here with me today. I had no idea about this part of his history. It's not something he had ever mentioned before. Learning this just made our relationship feel so much more precious and special to me. The fact that he's even alive is a miracle. It makes me appreciate every moment we have together, and it's made me reevaluate just how lucky we are to have found each other. This relationship means so much more to me now, knowing what he's been through. Story 56. I never really considered myself a cat person until I met my partner. When we started talking about getting another cat to keep our current one company, I stumbled upon an article about the realities of cat declawing. I was shocked to learn how inhumane and harmful the procedure can be for felines. It turned out my partner's first cat had been declawed. and she had thought the cat was just fine. But now that the first cat had passed away, she was considering declawing the next one. I tried to talk her out of it, but she seemed reluctant to accept the new information. As much as I cared for my partner, I couldn't ignore this fundamental difference in our values when it came to pet care. The idea of subjecting a cat to that kind of unnecessary surgery just didn't sit right with me. I had to reevaluate our whole relationship and whether we were truly compatible in the long run. Story 57. I thought I knew my partner well, but 9 months into our relationship, I discovered he had a court date for assaulting a bouncer. That was worrying enough, but then his mother let slip that the real reason was for assaulting his underage relative. When I confronted him about it, he changed his story, claiming the relative had actually raped him. I knew that couldn't be true, so I insisted on going with him to his lawyer's office. That's where I learned the horrifying truth. He had raped his own underage niece, not once, but twice. He'd been lying about it the whole time, telling everyone a different story. I was absolutely disgusted. I couldn't stay with someone capable of such a terrible crime, so I left immediately and haven't seen him since. That revelation completely shattered my trust and made me reevaluate the entire relationship. Story 58. I had been with my partner for several years, and we were pretty comfortable in our relationship. One day, I noticed something a little odd. They would get into the shower before turning the water on. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just a quirky habit. But as time went on, I started to realize that this was a regular occurrence. I wondered, why do they do that? Is it to save water? Are they just forgetful? Or is there something more to it? I decided to bring it up casually, just to understand their reasoning. Their response caught me by surprise. Apparently, they found it soothing to sit in the warm, dry shower for a few minutes before starting the water. It helped them mentally prepare for the day ahead. This small revelation made me reevaluate our entire relationship. I realized that there were probably a lot of little details about my partner that I didn't know, despite how close we were. It made me wonder what other habits or preferences they had that I was unaware of. It made me question how well I really knew this person I had committed so much of my life to. That simple shower ritual made me step back and take a deeper look at our relationship. Story 59. I was deeply in love with my partner, but over time I realized that their emotional walls were simply too high for me to ever get through. No matter how much I tried, I could never achieve the level of intimacy, affection, and romance that I craved in the relationship. They seemed unwilling or unable to open up and be vulnerable with me. It was heartbreaking, but I eventually had to accept that we were fundamentally incompatible, and I had to reevaluate whether this relationship was truly right for me in the long run. Story 60. I had been with my partner for many years, and I thought I knew them inside and out. But one day, I discovered a dark secret they had been hiding. They had committed a terrible act of sexual assault in the past. Learning this was absolutely devastating and made me question everything about our relationship. It made me reevaluate how well I really knew this person and whether I could ever truly trust them again. The revelation shattered my perception of who they were and forced me to make the difficult decision of whether to continue the relationship or walk away. It was an earth-shattering discovery that forced me to confront some very difficult truths. Story 61. I had been with my partner for years, and I thought I knew them through and through. But one day, I discovered something that completely caught me off guard. I realized that every flat, clean surface in our home was being used as a makeshift shelf. The countertops, the top of the fridge, even the windowsills. They were all covered in an assortment of random items that my partner had stashed away. It was like they had turned our entire living space into a covert storage facility. At first, I was bewildered. How had I never noticed this quirky habit before? As I looked closer, I saw that it wasn't just a few stray items here and there. It was a full-blown organizational system, with each surface serving a specific purpose. The top of the fridge was for seldom-used kitchen gadgets. The windowsills were for plants and trinkets, and the countertops were a rotating display of half-finished projects and random knickknacks. It made me question everything I thought I knew about my partner. Were they just inherently messy, or was this a coping mechanism of some kind? I couldn't help but wonder how many other little habits or idiosyncrasies I had overlooked over the years. It shook the foundation of our relationship and left me reevaluating whether we were truly compatible after all. Story 62. I had been dating my girlfriend for 2 years, and we were making plans for her to leave for college. She told me she was going to hang out with her friends, which I was okay with since we had planned to see each other every weekend. However, it turned out she didn't actually see her friends. Instead, she spent time with her ex-boyfriend. The next day, she left for school and didn't answer her phone for a week. When I finally talked to her after she arrived, she confessed what she had done and then broke up with me. It was a devastating revelation that made me reevaluate our entire relationship. Story 63. I had been with my fiancé for about a year when I learned something that really troubled me. One day, he casually mentioned that his mother was to blame for being in an abusive relationship, saying she had let herself be beaten by her boyfriend. I was stunned by this victim-blaming attitude, so unlike the kind and caring person I thought I knew, I needed some time to process this. I couldn't even talk to him for the next hour, as I reevaluated everything about our relationship so far. Eventually, I sat him down to discuss it further. When I asked him if he thought it was my fault that I had been groped on public transport, he quickly said definitely not. That response made me realize he didn't actually believe victims were responsible for the abuse they suffered. He acknowledged that his previous comments about his mother were wrong and has since been much more understanding and supportive towards her. This incident was a real wake-up call for me, but we were able to work through it and come to a better understanding. Story 64. I was several months into a year-long relationship when I started to notice some concerning behavior from my partner. He would often talk in his sleep, and it became clear that he was having frequent sexual dreams about other people in his life. His ex, his college RA, even his straight roommate. At first, it didn't bother me too much, as I understood he had a history with his ex. But as the dreams continued, involving more and more people, I grew increasingly unsettled. Then one night, I woke up to find my partner fondling me and calling out his roommate's name. I had to physically pull him off of me a few times before he finally stopped. That was a huge red flag that made me reevaluate the entire relationship. It showed a level of infidelity and inappropriate behavior that I couldn't overlook. Needless to say, the relationship ended soon after that incident. Story 65. After a decade together, I realized my partner was still behaving like an impulsive, overly emotional teenager despite being nearly 30 years old. They seemed perpetually disorganized and lacking in maturity. Honestly, I found myself struggling to remember why I fell for them in the first place, and even questioning why I was still with them. It really made me step back and reevaluate the entire relationship. Story 66. Years into our marriage, I learned that my husband was struggling with alcoholism. When we were younger, we'd occasionally have a few drinks at parties or with friends, but nothing too excessive. However, I started noticing that he would come home from work already intoxicated, without any visible signs of drinking. Eventually, he confessed that he had been drinking alone and hiding the bottles. This revelation was heartbreaking. I knew I needed to be there for him, but I also found myself grieving the loss of our casual drinking together. No more sharing a bottle of wine over dinner, no more celebratory champagne on New Year's Eve, no more beers while watching the game. It was a real adjustment, and I had to come to terms with the fact that our relationship would never be the same. But with his commitment to sobriety and our hard work, we've been able to move forward and build a new normal. Story 67. One night, my wife and I were watching a Guess That Song video in bed. When the Village People's hit YMCA came on, she turned to me and asked who sang it. I chuckled, thinking she was joking, but she insisted she didn't know. It dawned on me then that my wife of 9 years had never heard of the iconic disco group. I started to wonder what other gaps might exist in her cultural knowledge. Another red flag emerged when we were eating burgers, and she took a bite from the complete opposite side of the one I had been eating from. It wasn't a cootie thing. We'd been together for nearly a decade by that point. No, this was something else entirely. I began to suspect my wife might not be the person I thought she was. In fact, I couldn't help but wonder if she was some kind of alien imposter, cleverly posing as human in order to take over the world. The revelation was deeply unsettling and made me reevaluate our entire relationship. Story 68. I was really serious about my partner, and we were even looking at moving in together. But after a while, we just couldn't find the right place. That's when he casually brought up that he had around $7,000 in credit card debt. His excuse was that he had an unexpected child with his ex Mike DeCef, but this kid was already 8 years old. I just couldn't believe he had kept that kind of major financial secret from me for so long. It really made me rethink the entire relationship and whether we were truly compatible. Finding out about that debt so late in the game was a huge red flag that shook my trust. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.